Behind every great moment lies a story of preparation, and for Maya Carter, that story began long before she ever stepped foot in Judge Hargrove's courtroom. Her secret weapon wasn't just her sharp mind or quick wit. It was Evelyn Thompson, a retired civil rights attorney who had become both a mentor and a guiding light in Maya's life. Evelyn had seen something special in the young girl years ago, when Maya sat wide-eyed during a career day presentation at school, asking questions that were far more thoughtful than those of her peers. From that day on, Evelyn took Maya under her wing, nurturing her passion for justice and teaching her the intricacies of the law. In the weeks leading up to the trial, Evelyn became Maya's rock. They spent countless hours poring over legal textbooks, dissecting past cases, and strategizing how to present Maya's defense. Evelyn's dining table was cluttered with papers, highlighters, and sticky notes, each one marking a key point or precedent they could use in court. "You've got to think like a lawyer," Evelyn would say, tapping the table for emphasis. "But don't forget, you're also fighting for fairness. That's what the law is supposed to be about." Evelyn knew the odds were stacked against Maya. Not only was she facing false accusations, but she was also going up against a judge notorious for his biases. Still, Evelyn refused to let Maya lose hope. "This isn't just your fight anymore," she told her firmly one evening as they reviewed their notes. "It's a chance to show people that no matter who you are or where you come from, the law belongs to everyone." On the morning of the trial, Evelyn handed Maya a thick folder filled with meticulously organized research. Inside were summaries of landmark cases, constitutional arguments, and even psychological insights into how bias affects decision-making. "Everything you need is in here," Evelyn said, placing a reassuring hand on Maya's shoulder. "But remember, the most important tool you have isn't in this folder. It's in here." She tapped her finger gently against Maya's foremost powerful asset, her ability to stay composed under pressure. As they walked toward the courthouse together, Evelyn reminded Maya of one final piece of advice. "Don't let him rattle you. Judges like Hargrove thrive on making people feel small. But you're not small. You're smart, brave, and ready for this. Trust yourself." Maya clutched the folder tightly, feeling its weight not just in her arms but in her heart. It represented months of hard work, late nights, and unwavering determination. More importantly, it symbolized the faith Evelyn had in her, a faith that gave Maya the courage to face whatever came next. Inside the courtroom, as Judge Hargrove continued to mock her, Maya kept thinking back to Evelyn's words. Each snide comment, each dismissive glance only fueled her resolve. She reminded herself that she wasn't alone. Evelyn's wisdom was right there with her, woven into every argument and strategy she had prepared. And while Judge Hargrove might have underestimated her, Maya knew exactly what she was capable of. The folder on the podium in front of her wasn't just a collection of papers, it was a lifeline, a testament to the power of preparation and mentorship. As Maya flipped through its pages, she felt a surge of confidence. She wasn't just a teenager standing in a courtroom. She was a student of the law, armed with knowledge, and guided by someone who believed in her completely. Whatever happened next, Maya was ready. As the courtroom settled into an uneasy silence, Maya seized the moment to drive her point home. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom anymore. She was confronting the very prejudice that had put her in this position. With a steady gaze, she turned directly toward Judge Hargrove and spoke with a calmness that masked the fire burning inside her. "Your Honor," she began, her voice ringing clear and deliberate, "you laughed at me earlier because of how I look and how old I am. You assumed I couldn't possibly understand the law or defend myself. But isn't it ironic that the laws you swore to uphold are designed to protect people from exactly that kind of judgment?" Her words hung heavy in the air, cutting through the tension like a knife. The gallery, which had been whispering quietly until now, fell completely silent. Even the bailiff stopped shuffling papers, his pen frozen midair. Every eye in the room was fixed on Maya, whose composure never wavered. Judge Hargrove shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his usual bravado crumbling under the weight of her accusation. Maya pressed on, her tone respectful but firm. The Constitution guarantees fairness and equal treatment under the law, regardless of age, race, gender, or anything else. Yet here we are, in a courtroom where those principles seem to have been forgotten. She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in before continuing. I'm not standing here today asking for special treatment, Your Honor. I'm asking for what every person deserves, a fair chance to prove my innocence. She then gestured to the folder in front of her, the one filled with painstakingly researched legal precedents and arguments. This isn't about me being smarter than anyone else. It's about preparation, hard work, and believing in the system, even when the system doesn't always believe in me. If I can show up here and present a defense rooted in facts and the law, shouldn't that be enough? Shouldn't justice be enough? For the first time in the entire hearing, Judge Hargrove looked genuinely unsettled. His fingers drummed nervously on the bench as he avoided making direct eye contact with Maya. He knew she was right, and worse, everyone else in the room knew it too. What started as a routine case had spiraled into something far more profound, a reckoning not just for him, but for the biases embedded within the judicial process itself. Maya's courage didn't stop there. She took a step further, addressing the broader implications of what was happening in that courtroom. Prejudice doesn't always come in loud, obvious ways, she said softly, her voice tinged with both sadness and resolve. Sometimes it hides behind smirks, dismissive comments, or assumptions we don't even realize we're making. And while it might feel small in the moment, it adds up to real consequences for real people. Her final sentence landed like a thunderclap. If we want justice to mean something, we have to hold ourselves accountable. Not just you, Your Honor, but all of us. The room remained eerily quiet as Maya stepped back from the podium. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face betrayed no fear, only determination. For the first time, Judge Hargrove seemed unsure of what to say. He glanced around the courtroom, perhaps sensing the collective weight of the spectators' stares. They weren't just watching a trial anymore. They were witnessing a young woman challenge the very foundation of fairness and win. In that moment, Maya wasn't just a defendant. She was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the smallest voices could demand change. And whether Judge Hargrove liked it or not, he was being forced to confront the reality of his own biases. In a quiet, unassuming town where everyone seemed to know each other's business, 17-year-old Maya Carter found herself standing nervously in a courtroom. The room buzzed with murmurs as people turned their heads to catch a glimpse of the young girl who had somehow landed herself in legal trouble. Maya was no stranger to challenges. She worked hard at school, took care of her younger siblings when her mom was busy juggling jobs, and dreamed of becoming an attorney one day. But none of that mattered now. Not in this cold, intimidating room. The judge presiding over the case was Richard Hargrove, a man whose stern face and sharp tone struck fear into anyone who dared appear before him. Known for his rigid views and quick judgments, Judge Hargrove had earned a reputation as someone who didn't mince words or show mercy. As he adjusted his glasses and glanced at Maya from across the bench, it was clear he already had an opinion about her. His lips curled into a faint smirk as he looked down at the nervous teenager fidgeting with the papers in her hands. Maya had been accused of vandalizing a local store, a claim she vehemently denied. What really happened was far less dramatic but still infuriating. Earlier that week, Maya's younger brother, Ethan, had gotten into a heated argument with another boy outside the store. When things escalated, Maya stepped in to protect Ethan, raising her voice to defuse the situation. Unfortunately, a passerby misinterpreted her actions and called the police, leading to her arrest. Now here she was, trying to explain herself to a judge who clearly thought very little of her. As the bailiff called the court to order, Maya could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her. She tried to focus, gripping the edge of the wooden podium in front of her like it was a lifeline. Her heart raced as Judge Hargrove began speaking, his deep voice echoing through the room. "Miss Carter," he said, leaning back in his chair with an air of superiority, "you're telling me you didn't cause any damage. That's quite a bold claim for someone your age." His tone dripped with sarcasm, and a few spectators exchanged knowing glances. They'd seen this kind of treatment before. Judge Hargrove wasn't exactly known for being fair to those he deemed beneath him. He leaned forward slightly, narrowing his eyes. "Tell me, Miss Carter, do you even understand what vandalism means, or did you need someone to explain it to you?" The comment stung, but Maya refused to let it show. Instead, she took a deep breath and nodded politely. "Yes, Your Honor," she replied softly, though her voice carried enough strength to make him pause. "I understand what vandalism is, and I assure you, I didn't commit it." Judge Hargrove chuckled under his breath, shaking his head dismissively. "Well, we'll see about that," he muttered, scribbling something on his notepad. To him, Maya was just another troubled kid wasting his time. He couldn't have been more wrong. What Judge Hargrove failed to notice was the determination burning in Maya's eyes. Beneath her calm exterior lay a mind sharper than most adults twice her age. Over the past few weeks, she had spent countless hours researching laws, studying similar cases, and preparing her defense. With the help of her mentor, Evelyn, a retired attorney who believed in Maya's potential, she had crafted a strategy that would leave even seasoned lawyers impressed. But all Judge Hargrove saw was a scared teenager clutching a stack of papers. Little did he know, Maya wasn't just fighting for her freedom. She was also fighting to prove that appearances can be deceiving. And by the end of the day, Judge Hargrove, and everyone else in that courtroom, would learn never to underestimate someone simply because of their age or how they look. The moment Maya began speaking again, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Judge Hargrove had clearly expected her to crumble under his dismissive remarks, but instead, she stood taller, her voice steady and clear. She opened the folder in front of her, pulling out a sheet of paper marked with bold highlights. "Your Honor," she said, addressing him directly, "I'd like to reference Section 537 of the state's Criminal Code, which defines vandalism as intentional damage or destruction of property. Nowhere in that definition does it include stepping in to prevent harm." Judge Hargrove raised an eyebrow, leaning slightly forward. He hadn't anticipated this level of detail from someone so young. Still, he smirked, trying to maintain his air of superiority. "And what makes you think citing statutes will change anything here?" he asked, his tone laced with skepticism. Maya didn't hesitate. "Because facts matter, Your Honor." And according to witness statements provided by the store owner himself, there was no actual damage done to the property. The accusation is based solely on assumptions, not evidence. Her words hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. A murmur rippled through the gallery as spectators exchanged surprised glances. No one had expected the teenager to counter the prosecution's claims so effectively. But Maya wasn't done yet. Flipping to another page in her folder, she continued, "Furthermore, case law supports my argument. In State v. Reynolds, the court ruled that mere verbal confrontation without physical action cannot constitute vandalism. If we apply that precedent here, the charges against me should be dismissed outright." For the first time since the hearing began, Judge Hargrove looked genuinely uneasy. His earlier confidence wavered as he glanced down at his notes, searching for a response. The prosecutor, too, seemed caught off guard, fumbling through his own files in an attempt to refute her points. But Maya pressed on, her poise unshakable. She then addressed the issue of bias head-on, though subtly. "Your Honor, I understand that people sometimes make judgments based on appearances, but the law exists to protect us from those kinds of mistakes. My age doesn't determine my innocence any more than it determines my knowledge of the law." Her voice carried both strength and respect, striking the perfect balance between assertiveness and humility. By now, even the stenographer had stopped typing, captivated by the unfolding drama. The room fell silent except for the sound of Maya's measured words echoing against the wooden walls. For every condescending remark Judge Hargrove had made earlier, Maya offered a calm, logical rebuttal. Each sentence chipped away at his authority, exposing the flaws in his initial assumptions. As she wrapped up her argument, Maya turned to face the judge once more. "All I ask is that you look beyond preconceived notions and focus on the facts. That's what justice requires, and that's what I believe you strive to uphold." Her final statement landed with quiet power, leaving no room for doubt about her capabilities. Judge Hargrove sat back in his chair, his expression unreadable. Gone was the smug smirk. In its place was something closer to contemplation. He glanced around the room, perhaps sensing the weight of the eyes watching him. For the first time, he realized he might have underestimated the young woman standing before him. What started as a routine hearing had transformed into something far greater, a demonstration of intellect, resilience, and the sheer force of preparation. Maya Carter wasn't just defending herself anymore. She was proving a point, and everyone in that courtroom, including Judge Hargrove, could feel it. The silence in the courtroom was palpable as Judge Hargrove sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the young woman standing before him. For a man who prided himself on control and authority, this was unfamiliar territory. Maya's words had struck a nerve, exposing fault lines in his own beliefs that he hadn't dared to examine. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his response. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Judge Hargrove cleared his throat and leaned forward. His usual stern demeanor had softened, replaced by something closer to vulnerability. "Miss Carter," he began, his voice quieter than before, I must admit, I may have misjudged you." The admission hung in the air, raw and unexpected. It wasn't just an apology, it was a confession, one that carried the weight of years of ingrained bias. Maya blinked, surprised but composed. She nodded slightly, her expression calm and respectful. "Thank you for saying that, Your Honor," she replied softly. "It takes courage to admit when we're wrong, and it's the first step toward making things right." Her graciousness disarmed him further. Judge Hargrove hesitated, then added, "Your arguments today have been impressive, far beyond what I expected from someone your age, or anyone, frankly." He glanced down at his notes, almost as if searching for something to anchor himself. "You've given me, and perhaps this court, a lot to reflect on." For the spectators, the moment was surreal. Many had walked into the courtroom expecting a quick verdict against a teenager they assumed would crumble under pressure. Instead, they were witnessing a transformation, not just in Maya, but in the judge himself. Some exchanged glances, others whispered quietly, while a few simply stared in awe. No one could deny that something extraordinary was unfolding. Judge Hargrove paused again, gathering his thoughts. "Let the record show," he said firmly, addressing the stenographer, "that I acknowledge my earlier behavior was inappropriate and prejudiced. I will ensure that this does not influence my decision in this case, or any future cases." His words were met with stunned silence, followed by a few hesitant nods from the gallery. While some might question whether his apology was genuine, no one could deny its significance. As the hearing resumed, Judge Hargrove's tone had shifted entirely. Gone was the condescension. In its place was a newfound respect for the young woman before him. He listened intently as Maya wrapped up her final points, asking thoughtful questions and even nodding in agreement at times. It was as though he were seeing her, and the case, for the first time. When the proceedings concluded, Judge Hargrove announced that he would take the matter under advisement and deliver his verdict later that day. As Maya gathered her papers and stepped away from the podium, Evelyn stood up from her seat in the gallery, pride radiating from her face. She gave Maya a small, encouraging smile, mouthing the words, "You did it." Outside the courtroom, reporters buzzed with excitement, eager to capture the story of the teen who had turned the tables on a biased judge. But Maya remained focused. This wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about proving a point. As she walked alongside Evelyn, she reflected on how far she'd come. From being dismissed as just another troubled kid to earning the respect of someone who had doubted her, Maya had shown that accountability and redemption were possible, even in the most unlikely places. Back inside the courtroom, Judge Hargrove sat alone for a moment, deep in thought. He knew his apology wouldn't erase years of prejudice, nor would it repair the damage caused by his actions. But it was a start, and sometimes, Maya had reminded him, starting over was the hardest and most important step of all. The courtroom felt suffocating as Judge Hargrove continued to dominate the proceedings, his every word laced with condescension. Maya stood at the podium, her hands trembling slightly but her mind razor-sharp. She could feel the weight of his dismissive gaze, as though he were looking straight through her, seeing not a person but a stereotype. A young, inexperienced girl who didn't belong in his courtroom. His chuckles and snide remarks echoed louder than necessary, each one landing like a blow meant to undermine her confidence. "Let's get this over with," Judge Hargrove said with an exaggerated sigh, leaning back in his chair as if bored already. "Miss Carter, why don't you tell us your side of the story? Though I doubt it'll change much." He gave her a patronizing smile, clearly expecting her to stumble or break down under pressure. But Maya didn't flinch. Instead, she squared her shoulders and took a deep breath, determined to hold her ground. As she began speaking, explaining how she had intervened to protect her younger brother during the altercation outside the store, Judge Hargrove interrupted her almost immediately. "Oh, so now we're playing the hero," he quipped, raising an eyebrow. "That's quite the dramatic tale for someone who claims innocence." His tone was mocking, dripping with disbelief. A few people in the gallery shifted uncomfortably, while others exchanged glances, unsure whether to laugh along with him or feel sorry for the teenager being humiliated on the stand. Maya clenched her fists briefly before forcing herself to relax. She knew better than to let his words rattle her. This wasn't about him. It was about proving the truth. Still, the constant interruptions made it hard for her to present her case coherently. Every time she tried to explain, Judge Hargrove cut her off with another sarcastic remark or dismissive wave of his hand. It was as if he had decided her guilt long before she even entered the courtroom. At one point, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on the bench, and fixed her with a piercing stare. "You know, Miss Carter," he began, his voice carrying just enough mockery to make her grit her teeth, "most defendants bring lawyers to speak for them. Not that I blame you, after all. What can a teenager possibly know about the law?" He chuckled softly, shaking his head as if amused by his own cleverness. The comment drew a few nervous laughs from the spectators, but Maya remained unfazed. She glanced down at the folder in her hands, filled with research and notes she'd painstakingly prepared with Evelyn's help. The irony wasn't lost on her. Judge Hargrove thought she was clueless, yet everything she needed to dismantle his assumptions was right there in front of her. All she had to do was wait for the right moment to strike. Despite the growing tension in the room, Maya couldn't help but notice something subtle in Judge Hargrove's behavior. For all his bluster and bravado, there was a flicker of unease in his eyes, a hint that maybe, just maybe, he was starting to realize he underestimated her. But Maya didn't dwell on it. She focused instead on maintaining her composure, letting his mockery roll off her like water off a duck's back. As the hearing dragged on, Judge Hargrove grew increasingly impatient. "Enough of this," he snapped finally, cutting her off mid-sentence. "If you have something worthwhile to say, Miss Carter, then say it. Otherwise, we're wasting everyone's time here." His words hung heavy in the air, daring her to rise to the occasion. What Judge Hargrove didn't realize was that he had just handed Maya the opening she needed. With a calmness that belied the storm brewing inside her, she looked up at him and nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said politely, her voice steady. "I'll get right to the point." And with that, Maya began laying out her defense, not just against the charges, but also against the prejudice that had clouded the entire trial from the start. If Judge Hargrove thought he could intimidate her into silence, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The ripple effects of Maya's courtroom victory stretched far beyond the small town where it all began. Her story became a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt underestimated or dismissed because of their age, appearance, or background. News outlets couldn't get enough of the teenager who had outsmarted a biased judge and turned her trial into a lesson on justice and equality. Documentaries were made, articles written, and speeches given about how one person's courage could spark change. Maya didn't let the attention go to her head. Instead, she used her newfound platform to amplify voices that often went unheard. She traveled to schools, community centers, and legal conferences, sharing her journey and encouraging others to believe in themselves. "If I can stand up to someone like Judge Hargrove," she would say with a warm smile, "then you can stand up for what matters to you too." Her talks inspired countless young people to pursue careers in law, activism, and public service, fields where fairness and representation were desperately needed. Her academic achievements soared as well. With renewed determination, Maya graduated at the top of her class, earning scholarships to prestigious universities. She chose a school known for its strong law program, where professors quickly recognized her potential. By the time she earned her degree, Maya had already clerked for 2 renowned civil rights attorneys and co-authored a paper on systemic bias in the judicial system, a topic close to her heart. When she passed the bar exam and officially became an attorney, the celebration wasn't just hers. It belonged to everyone who had supported her along the way. Evelyn, now in her late 70s, beamed with pride as she watched Maya take her oath. "You've only just begun," Evelyn told her afterward, pulling her into a tight hug. "The world is waiting for what you'll do next." True to her mentor's words, Maya wasted no time making her mark. She opened her own practice, specializing in cases involving marginalized communities and wrongful accusations. Her approach was unique. She combined sharp legal strategies with empathy and understanding, ensuring her clients felt seen and heard. Word spread quickly, and soon her office was bustling with people seeking not just legal help, but also guidance and encouragement. Judge Hargrove, meanwhile, continued his efforts to address bias within the judiciary. Though some colleagues mocked him for being overly reflective, he persisted, knowing he owed it to himself and to Maya to do better. He reached out to her occasionally, asking for advice on reform initiatives or inviting her to speak at judicial workshops. Their relationship evolved from adversarial to collaborative, proving that even the most unlikely alliances could lead to meaningful progress. Over time, Maya's case set a precedent, not legally, but culturally. It challenged judges, lawyers, and everyday citizens to examine their own biases and consider how those assumptions affected real lives. Legal textbooks began referencing her trial as an example of resilience and advocacy, while educators incorporated her story into curriculums to inspire future generations. Years later, when Maya was invited to deliver a keynote speech at a national conference on justice reform, she stood before a packed auditorium and reflected on her journey. "I didn't set out to change the world," she admitted, her voice steady and heartfelt. "I just wanted to prove that I deserved a fair shot." But sometimes, standing up for yourself means standing up for others too. And if my story helps even one person find their voice, then every moment of this fight has been worth it. As she stepped off the stage to thunderous applause, Maya knew her work was far from over. Justice wasn't something you achieved once. It was something you fought for every single day. And Maya Carter, she was ready to keep fighting. For herself, for her clients, and for a future where no one would have to face the kind of prejudice she had overcome. The courtroom was abuzz with anticipation as everyone waited for Judge Hargrove's verdict. Reporters scribbled notes furiously. Cameras clicked outside the building, and spectators whispered among themselves about what might happen next. Maya sat quietly at the defendant's table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Though outwardly calm, her mind raced with possibilities. She had done everything she could, presented her case, cited laws, and confronted prejudice head-on. But now it was out of her hands. Finally, the bailiff called the room to order, and Judge Hargrove re-entered, his expression unreadable. He adjusted his robes, took a deep breath, and began to speak. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, he said slowly, his voice steady, "I find no credible basis to support the charge of vandalism against Miss Maya Carter." The words landed like a thunderclap, sending waves of relief and excitement through the room. Gasps erupted from the gallery, followed by applause that Judge Hargrove quickly silenced with a raised hand. But the message was clear. Justice had prevailed. Maya exhaled deeply, tears welling up in her eyes. For weeks, she had carried the weight of this accusation, knowing it wasn't just her freedom on the line, but also her reputation. Now, vindicated, she felt lighter than she had in days. Evelyn reached over and squeezed her hand, pride shining in her eyes. "You did it, Maya," she whispered. "This is your moment." But the victory didn't end there. Judge Hargrove went on to address the larger issue at play. "This case has been an important reminder, for me personally and for all of us, that assumptions can cloud judgment, even within the halls of justice. Miss Carter demonstrated not only legal acumen but also grace under pressure. Her defense highlighted the importance of fairness, accountability, and self-reflection." His words resonated deeply, earning nods of agreement from those present. As the hearing concluded, reporters swarmed around Maya outside the courthouse. Microphones were thrust toward her face, and cameras flashed as journalists clamored for her reaction. "How does it feel to win?" one reporter asked. Another chimed in, "What do you want people to take away from this case?" Maya paused, collecting her thoughts before responding. "I hope this shows people that age or appearance shouldn't define how we're treated," she said, her voice strong yet gentle. "Everyone deserves a fair chance, especially in a courtroom. And while today's outcome means a lot to me, I hope it sparks conversations about how we can make our justice system better for everyone." Her words struck a chord, earning praise from advocates and critics alike. News outlets picked up the story, dubbing her the teen attorney who changed minds. Social media exploded with hashtags like #JusticeForMaya and #FairCourtsForAll, celebrating her resilience and brilliance. Even late-night talk show hosts joked about Judge Hargrove's humbling experience, turning the story into both inspiration and entertainment. Meanwhile, Judge Hargrove kept his promise to reflect on his actions. In the weeks that followed, he announced plans to undergo sensitivity training and invited community leaders to discuss systemic biases within the judicial system. While some dismissed his efforts as too little, too late, others saw them as genuine steps toward change. He even reached out to Maya personally, thanking her for challenging him to be better. "You reminded me why I became a judge in the first place," he admitted during their brief meeting. "To serve justice, not hinder it." For Maya, the aftermath of the trial brought opportunities she never imagined. Local attorneys offered internships, schools invited her to speak, and organizations sought her input on youth advocacy initiatives. Yet despite the newfound attention, Maya remained grounded. Her focus stayed on her ultimate goal, becoming an attorney who fights for fairness and equality. As she walked home one evening, arm in arm with Evelyn, she smiled softly. "This isn't the end," she said. "It's just the beginning." And she was right. What started as a personal battle had ignited something much bigger, a movement toward accountability, understanding, and hope.